When we talk about human nature, we have to begin at the beginning. Our species, Homo sapiens, has been walking this earth for roughly 300,000 years. That's a long time, but it's crucial to understand that for 290,000 of those years, we lived very differently than we do today. We were hunter-gatherers, living in small groups, navigating a world of immediate physical dangers and simple social structures. This matters because our brains and bodies were shaped during this period. Every instinct, every emotional response, every social tendency we have today was crafted in that environment. When you feel anxious about giving a presentation at work, your body is responding with the same mechanism it used when your ancestors spotted a predator. When you crave sugar, you're experiencing an adaptation that once helped us survive food scarcity by driving us to seek out rare, high-calorie foods. Let's break down some specific examples of how our evolutionary past shows up in our modern lives. Consider our social instincts. We evolved to live in groups of around 150 people, known as Dunbar's number. This wasn't arbitrary. It was the maximum number of social relationships our brains could effectively track. Today, we might have thousands of social media connections, but we still tend to maintain close relationships with roughly the same number of people. Our tribal instincts, which once helped us survive by promoting group cohesion, now manifest in everything from sports team loyalty to political polarization. When you feel a surge of pride watching your team win, or when you feel angry at people who hold different political views, you're experiencing ancient tribal mechanisms at work. The way we process fear is another fascinating example. Our brains are biased toward detecting threats, a trait called negativity bias. In our ancestral environment, missing a potential danger could mean death, while missing a potential reward usually just meant a missed meal. This is why negative news captures our attention more than positive news, why we dwell on criticism more than praise, and why one bad experience can overshadow many good ones. Our status-seeking behavior is also deeply rooted in our evolutionary past. In hunter-gatherer societies, higher status meant better access to resources and mates, increasing the likelihood of passing on one's genes. Today, we still obsess over status, but it manifests in new ways: job titles, social media followers, brand name possessions. The underlying drive remains the same, even though the markers of status have changed. Consider also our cognitive biases. We evolved to be pattern-seeking creatures because finding patterns helped us survive. If our ancestors ate a certain berry and got sick, they learned to avoid similar-looking berries. This was efficient but imperfect pattern recognition. Today, we still seek patterns everywhere, sometimes finding them where they don't exist, leading to superstitions, conspiracy theories, and other forms of magical thinking. Our capacity for language, arguably our species' most distinctive trait, evolved as a social tool. Language allowed us to share information, coordinate actions, and strengthen social bonds. This explains why gossip is universal across cultures. It's not a moral failing, but rather an adaptation that helped our ancestors track social relationships and maintain group cohesion. Even our emotional responses, which might seem purely personal, follow universal patterns shaped by evolution. Paul Ekman's research showed that basic emotions like happiness, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and surprise are recognized across cultures. These emotions emerged because they helped our ancestors respond appropriately to different situations. Fear prompted retreat from danger. Disgust helped avoid contaminated food. Anger mobilized resources for fighting threats. Our mating preferences and romantic behaviors also show clear evolutionary influences. The butterflies in your stomach when you're attracted to someone, jealousy in relationships, the desire for long-term pair bonding. These all served specific evolutionary functions related to reproduction and child-rearing. Understanding these evolutionary roots doesn't mean we're destined to be slaves to our ancient programming, but it does help explain why certain patterns of behavior and emotion seem so persistent across cultures and throughout history. It's why we still respond to social rejection as if it were a physical threat, why we crave foods that are now unhealthy for us, and why we struggle with anxiety in situations that pose no real physical danger. This evolutionary legacy presents both challenges and opportunities. The same pattern recognition abilities that can lead to prejudice also enable us to learn and adapt. Our tribal instincts can cause conflict, but they also give us the capacity for deep cooperation and loyalty. Our status-seeking behavior can be destructive, but it can also motivate us to achieve and contribute to society. The key is recognizing these patterns for what they are, not immutable destiny, but rather the starting conditions from which we can consciously evolve. As we move forward in our discussion of human nature and change, this evolutionary foundation will help us understand both the constraints we face and the remarkable flexibility we possess. This brings us to our next topic: how our brains can change and adapt despite these deep evolutionary patterns. Now that we understand our evolutionary foundation, let's explore something remarkable: the brain's ability to change. The term neuroplasticity might sound technical, but it represents one of the most hopeful discoveries about human nature. Our brains can physically reorganize themselves in response to our experiences and behaviors. Think of your brain as a vast forest. When you repeatedly perform an action or think certain thoughts, you're creating paths through this forest. The more you travel these paths, the clearer and easier to follow they become. This is literally what's happening in your brain. Neural pathways strengthen with use and weaken with disuse. Let's look at some remarkable examples of this plasticity in action. Consider London taxi drivers, who must memorize thousands of streets and routes to get their license. Research shows their hippocampus, the brain region involved in spatial navigation, actually grows larger during their training. Their brains physically adapted to meet the demands of their profession. Or take the case of stroke victims who lose the ability to speak. Through intensive therapy, many can regain speech abilities as their brains create new neural pathways to bypass damaged areas. This isn't just recovery. It's the brain literally rewiring itself to restore function. This plasticity extends to our habits and behaviors. When you're trying to form a new habit, you're actually carving new neural pathways. The discomfort you feel when changing behavior isn't just psychological. It's your brain expending extra energy to create these new pathways instead of following the easy, well-worn ones. The science of habit formation reveals some fascinating patterns. Research from University College London showed that habit formation follows a predictable curve. Initially, it requires significant conscious effort. Over time, the behavior becomes increasingly automatic as the neural pathways strengthen. This explains why the first few weeks of any change are the hardest. You're literally building new brain architecture. But it's not just about repetition. Emotion plays a crucial role in brain plasticity. When we experience something with strong emotional content, our brains release neurochemicals that essentially tag that experience as important, making it more likely to create lasting neural changes. This is why traumatic experiences can create such lasting impacts, but it's also why positive, emotionally meaningful experiences can be transformative. Learning itself is a form of brain plasticity. When you learn something new, whether it's a language, a musical instrument, or a mathematical concept, you're creating new neural connections. The more you practice, the stronger these connections become. This is why learning tends to follow a pattern. Rapid initial progress, followed by plateaus, followed by new breakthroughs. Sleep plays a vital role in this process. During sleep, your brain consolidates new learning, strengthening important connections and pruning away unnecessary ones. It's like your brain's editing process, deciding what information is worth keeping and strengthening those pathways accordingly. Age affects plasticity, but not as much as we once thought. While it's true that young brains are more plastic, we now know that adult brains retain significant capacity for change. The key difference is that adult brains require more focused effort and repetition to create new pathways. Environmental enrichment significantly impacts brain plasticity. Exposure to new experiences, social interaction, physical exercise, and mental challenges all promote the brain's ability to change and adapt. This is why activities that combine multiple types of stimulation, like learning a new sport or traveling to a new country, can feel so invigorating and transformative. The implications of neuroplasticity for personal change are profound. It means that many of our traits and tendencies, while influenced by our evolutionary past, aren't fixed. Through focused effort and the right conditions, we can literally reshape our brains. This includes emotional patterns, cognitive habits, and even personality traits that might seem deeply ingrained. However, it's important to understand that plasticity has limits. The brain doesn't change randomly or easily. It changes in response to sustained experience and practice. Quick fixes and temporary changes rarely create lasting neural reorganization. Real change requires consistent effort over time. This brings us to a crucial point about human nature. We are neither fully determined by our genes and early experiences, nor are we infinitely malleable. The truth lies in between. We have significant capacity for change, but this change follows certain principles and requires understanding how our brains actually work. As we move into our next segment, we'll explore how this plasticity interacts with our sense of self and consciousness. The question of who we are, our identity and sense of self, is perhaps the most profound mystery of human existence. We experience ourselves as continuous beings with stable personalities, yet science shows us that both our bodies and minds are in constant flux. Let's start with a startling fact. Most of your body's cells are replaced every 7 to 10 years. The you sitting here now is physically different from the you of a decade ago. Similarly, your memories, beliefs, and even personality traits shift over time, often so gradually you don't notice. Yet somehow, you maintain a consistent sense of being you. This sense of self is constructed by your brain through an ongoing process of narrative creation. Your brain is constantly weaving your experiences, memories, and beliefs into a coherent story about who you are. This isn't just philosophical speculation. Neuroscience has identified specific brain networks involved in maintaining this sense of self. Memory plays a crucial role in identity, but not in the way most people think. Every time you recall a memory, you're not actually accessing a perfect recording, you're reconstructing it. This reconstruction is influenced by your current state, your beliefs, and your subsequent experiences. This means your past isn't fixed. Your interpretation and memory of it changes as you change. Consider how this affects identity. If you think of yourself as shy, you'll likely recall instances that confirm this belief while overlooking times when you were outgoing. Your brain selectively reinforces aspects of memory that align with your current self-image. This is why two siblings can have completely different memories of their childhood. They're reconstructing the past through different identity lenses. Culture profoundly shapes our sense of self. People from individualistic societies tend to define themselves through personal achievements and unique traits, while those from collectivist cultures often define themselves more through relationships and group memberships. Neither view is more natural. They're both valid ways our brains construct identity within different cultural contexts. Relationships fundamentally shape who we are. The concept of the relational self suggests that we have different versions of ourselves that emerge in different relationships. You might be serious with colleagues, playful with old friends, and nurturing with family. These aren't fake versions of you. They're all authentic expressions of your identity in different contexts. Consciousness itself, our subjective experience of being, remains one of science's greatest mysteries. We know it emerges from brain activity, but exactly how remains unclear. What we do know is that consciousness represents only a tiny fraction of our brain's activity. Most of our decisions and behaviors are influenced by unconscious processes. This limited conscious awareness has important implications for personal change. Simply deciding to change often isn't enough because much of our behavior is driven by unconscious patterns. Effective change requires working with both conscious and unconscious processes. Our personalities, while showing some stability over time, are more fluid than previously thought. Research shows that major life experiences can significantly shift personality traits that were once considered fixed. Moving to a new country, starting a challenging career, or experiencing a life-changing event can alter fundamental aspects of who we are. The role of choice in identity is complex. While we can't choose everything about ourselves, we have more agency than many people realize. You can deliberately expose yourself to experiences that shape your identity. You can choose which aspects of your identity to emphasize or develop. You can even choose how to interpret your past experiences. This brings us to an important point about authenticity. People often worry that trying to change themselves is somehow fake or inauthentic. But if we understand identity as a dynamic, evolving process rather than a fixed essence, then conscious self-development is actually a deeply authentic expression of human nature. The relationship between identity and behavior works both ways. While our sense of self influences our actions also shape our identity. This is why fake it till you make it can actually work. By acting in new ways, we gradually internalize new aspects of identity. Understanding identity in this way, as dynamic, multi-layered, and partially constructed, opens up new possibilities for personal growth. Instead of asking, "Who am I really?" we might better ask, "Who am I becoming?" This shifts focus from discovering a fixed self to participating in our own development. As we move into our final segment, we'll explore how to apply these insights about identity and consciousness to create meaningful personal change. Now that we understand the science of human nature, brain plasticity, and identity, let's tackle the practical question. How do we actually create lasting personal change? First, we need to understand that transformation isn't about fighting against your nature. It's about working with your brain's natural mechanisms for change. Think of it like sailing. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails to reach your destination. Let's start with environment design. Your environment shapes your behavior far more than willpower. Want to exercise more? Put your workout clothes next to your bed. Want to eat healthier? Reorganize your kitchen so healthy foods are at eye level and junk food is hidden. Your brain is constantly responding to cues in your environment, so make these cues work for you rather than against you. Next, understand the habit loop. Cue, routine, reward. Every habitual behavior follows this pattern. To change a habit, you need to identify its components. What triggers the behavior? What reward is your brain seeking? Often, we try to break habits without understanding what need they're fulfilling. Instead of trying to eliminate a bad habit, replace it with a better one that provides a similar reward. Small changes compound over time. The mistake most people make is trying to transform everything at once. Your brain responds better to gradual, consistent change. Start with changes so small they seem almost trivial. Want to start meditating? Begin with 1 minute a day. Want to write more? Start with one sentence. These tiny actions build momentum and create new neural pathways. Identity-based habits are more powerful than outcome-based ones. Instead of focusing on what you want to achieve, focus on who you want to become. Rather than, "I want to lose weight," think, "I am becoming someone who takes care of their health." This shift changes the fundamental question from "What do I want?" to "Who am I becoming?" Understanding your resistance is crucial. When you feel resistance to change, don't fight it. Get curious about it. Resistance usually contains important information about what's holding you back. Are you afraid of something? Is there a competing commitment? Is the change threatening some aspect of your identity? Social environment matters enormously. We often underestimate how much our behavior is influenced by those around us. Want to make a change? Find people who are already living the way you want to live. Your brain naturally adapts to the standards of your social group. Track your progress, but focus on systems rather than goals. Goals are good for setting direction, but systems are what get you there. Instead of focusing on losing 20 pounds, focus on establishing sustainable eating and exercise habits. The goal focuses on what you want to achieve. The system focuses on who you need to become. Understand the role of stress and recovery in change. Your brain needs time to integrate new patterns. Build regular recovery periods into any change process. This might mean taking breaks, getting enough sleep, or allowing yourself occasional cheat days, not as failures, but as part of the system. Learn to work with your brain's reward system. Short-term rewards are more motivating than long-term ones. Create immediate positive feedback for behaviors you want to reinforce. Celebrate small wins. Make the process itself rewarding rather than just focusing on the end goal. Accept that change isn't linear. You'll have setbacks. Your brain is designed to fall back on established patterns under stress. Plan for these setbacks. Have strategies ready for when they occur. View them as data rather than failures. What can you learn from each setback? Remember that transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more fully yourself. Every change you make should align with your core values and authentic desires. The most sustainable changes feel like self-expression rather than self-control. Finally, understand that personal transformation is a lifelong journey, not a destination. Your brain will continue to change and adapt throughout your life. The goal isn't to reach some perfect end state, but to engage consciously in your own development. The capacity for change is fundamental to human nature. By understanding how your brain works, how habits form, how identity shapes behavior, and how to create the right conditions for change, you can participate more effectively in your own evolution. Remember, you are not fixed, but you're also not infinitely malleable. Work with your nature rather than against it. Start small, be consistent, and trust in your brain's natural capacity for change. The person you become tomorrow is being shaped by the choices you make today.